The precise moment my world fractured, I wasn't crying. I was holding a half-empty mug of lukewarm coffee, staring at a small, circular coffee stain on our reclaimed wood dining table, wondering if baking soda would get it out. Daniel was standing by the entryway, his coat already on, his suitcase sitting like a concrete block between us. He didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. He looked like the man who had promised to love me forever in front of 80 people 5 years ago, but his voice was completely devoid of that history. He told me he was leaving, and then he said her name. Sophie. My brain didn't register it as a betrayal at first. It registered as a bizarre grammatical error. Sophie was the girl who knew my childhood fear of moths. Sophie was the person who held my hair back when I got food poisoning on my 25th birthday. She wasn't a mistress. She was my sister in every way but blood. Yet there Daniel stood, telling me they had fallen in love, that they hadn't meant for it to happen, and that he was moving into her apartment by the end of the weekend. He said they didn't want to hurt me, as if fracturing my entire existence was just an unfortunate byproduct of their beautiful new beginning. When the door clicked shut behind him, the silence in the house didn't just feel empty. It felt heavy, pressing down on my chest until I forgot how to draw a full breath. I didn't know then that exactly 6 months later, those same two people would be kneeling on the pristine hardwood floor of my new office, weeping, holding a medical folder that contained a secret capable of destroying what little peace they had left, begging me for the one thing I had no obligation to give them. The first few days after the door closed were an exercise in functional numbness. You don't realize how much of your identity is tied up in a shared routine until the other person vanishes. I found myself making breakfast for two, setting out 2 forks, and then staring at the extra utensil with a wave of nausea so intense I had to sit on the kitchen floor. I didn't call Sophie. I kept waiting for her to call me, for her to tell me it was a horrific joke, or perhaps a hallucination brought on by stress. On the third night, I finally dialed her number. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Her voice greeting me was bright, bubbly, and completely unchanged, a relic of a time when we were whole. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I drove past her apartment complex at midnight, hatting myself for doing it, needing to see if his silver sedan was parked in her visitor spot. It was. It was parked right under the amber glow of a street lamp, gleaming, a physical proof of my new reality. The betrayal wasn't a sudden, sharp blow. It was a slow, agonizing realization that every memory I possessed from the last year was tainted. Every dinner we 3 had shared, every time Daniel stayed late at work and Sophie happened to be too busy to grab coffee, every knowing smile I had completely misread. I had been the oblivious center of their secret world, cheering them on, loving them both, completely blind to the fact that they were building their foundation on my ruins. By the end of the first week, the social ripples began to hit. In our friend group, Sophie had always been the magnetic one, the artist who brought energy to every room, while I was the reliable accountant, the one who managed the budgets, planned the trips, and kept everyone grounded. I quickly learned that when a marriage explodes because of an affair with a mutual best friend, people don't know where to stand. They don't want to choose, so they simply walk away from the person who embodies the tragedy. My phone grew terrifyingly quiet. Our mutual friend, Claire, called me once, her voice tight with discomfort. She told me she was so sorry, that what Daniel and Sophie did was awful, but then she added that Sophie was in a really bad place emotionally because of the guilt, and that maybe we all just needed space. The guilt. Sophie was the one suffering, apparently. I sat on my sofa, looking at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun, realizing that I was being edited out of my own life story. I wasn't just abandoned, I was erased. Daniel's family stopped texting me. My mother-in-law, who had given me a family heirloom necklace for our 3rd anniversary, sent a polite, devastatingly formal text asking for it back, stating it had been in their family for generations. I packaged it up, insured the box, and sent it back without a single tear. The tears had dried up, replaced by a cold, hollow ache that settled deep into my bones. The true rock bottom didn't happen in a dramatic burst of tears. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning at the bank. Daniel had agreed, via a clinical email from his new attorney, that I could keep the house for the duration of the divorce proceedings, provided I took over the mortgage payments entirely. I thought I could handle it, but when I sat down with the financial documents, I discovered that Daniel had quietly liquidated our joint savings account 3 weeks before he walked out. He had used the money to pay off the lease on Sophie's new art studio space. When I called him, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and panic, he answered on the second ring. He sounded defensive, his voice sharp. He told me he needed that money to start over, that I had always been the stable one with the good career, and that Sophie didn't have the financial security I did. He actually told me that I was stronger than her, so I didn't need the help as much as they did. He hung up before I could reply. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot, the rain drumming furiously against the windshield, looking at my bank balance on my phone. I had exactly $400 to my name after the mortgage payment cleared. I was 32 years old, completely alone, in a house that felt like a mausoleum, with no savings and a circle of friends that had vanished like smoke. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the empty rooms of the house, looking at the blank spaces on the walls where our photos used to hang. I realized I had two choices. I could spend the next year drowning in bitterness, tracking their happiness, and letting the injustice of what they did rot me from the inside out. Or I could accept that the life I had meticulously built was gone, and that the only person who was going to save Maria was Maria. The next morning, I called a local real estate agent. Within a month, the house was sold. It was a painful, stripping process, watching strangers walk through our bedroom, critiquing the paint colors we had chosen together. I sold most of the furniture, kept only what would fit into a tiny, one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city's commercial district, and used the equity from the house sale to clear every single debt I shared with Daniel. When the final divorce papers arrived, I signed them in blue ink, noted the official termination of our marriage, and felt an unexpected, faint spark of something I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't happiness. It was freedom. With nothing left to lose, I threw myself entirely into my work. For years, I had been an underpaid senior accountant at a mid-sized firm, putting my own career aspirations on the back burner so Daniel could pursue his dream of opening a boutique marketing agency. I had been the invisible scaffolding holding his life up. Now, that scaffolding was mine to build with. I approached the senior partners at my firm with a comprehensive proposal to launch a specialized forensic accounting division, focusing on small businesses navigating fraud and complex divorces. I knew firsthand how easily assets could be hidden, how devastating financial betrayal could be. The partners were hesitant, but they gave me 6 months to prove the concept. I worked 16-hour days. I forgot what a weekend felt like. I lived on microwave meals and black coffee, immersed in spreadsheets, tax codes, and court registries. My tiny apartment became a war room of financial data. Slowly, clients began to find me. Women who had been left with nothing, small business owners whose partners had embezzled funds. They saw in me someone who wouldn't just calculate their numbers, but someone who understood the precise weight of their heartbreak. My division didn't just succeed, it boomed. By the 5th month, the firm promoted me to partner, a milestone that came with a significant salary increase and a beautiful corner office overlooking the city skyline. I had earned every single square inch of that space through sheer, unyielding labor. While I was rebuilding my life from the bedrock up, the cracks in Daniel and Sophie's paradise were beginning to show, though I only learned of them through the periphery of our old social circle. Karma is rarely a lightning bolt. It is usually a slow leak. Daniel's marketing agency, which had relied heavily on my behind-the-scenes financial management, began to struggle. He was a creative thinker but a terrible businessman. Without my budgeting, he overextended, hiring too many staff members and renting an office space he couldn't afford to impress Sophie. Sophie's art studio, funded by my stolen savings, wasn't generating income. The art world is fickle, and her initial momentum quickly faded. They were living on credit, trying to maintain the illusion of a glamorous, star-crossed love story that had triumphed over adversity. But the reality of rent, taxes, and failing businesses doesn't care about romance. I heard through a former colleague that they were fighting constantly, their fiery passions souring into resentment as the financial pressure mounted. I didn't celebrate when I heard this. I felt a detached sort of pity. They had destroyed 3 lives for a fantasy, and now they were discovering that the fantasy required maintenance they couldn't afford. It was exactly 6 months to the day after Daniel walked out that my assistant knocked on my office door. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. She told me there was a couple in the lobby who didn't have an appointment, but they were refusing to leave until they spoke with me. She said the woman was crying and the man looked desperate. When I asked for their names, she hesitated before reading them off her notepad. Daniel and Sophie. My heart didn't leap into my throat. It didn't race with anger. It beat with a calm, measured rhythm that surprised even me. I adjusted the cuffs of my silk blouse, stood up, and told my assistant to show them in. When they entered my office, the contrast between our current realities was stark. Daniel looked hollowed out, his shoulders slouched, his suit slightly rumpled. Sophie was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, devoid of the vibrant energy that used to define her. They looked like ghosts of the people who had broken my heart. I didn't offer them a seat. I stood behind my desk, resting my hands on the polished mahogany surface, and asked them calmly why they were there. Sophie was the one who broke first. She sank onto her knees right there on my floor, her hands trembling as she held up a thick manila folder. Daniel didn't stop her. He just closed his eyes, a tear escaping and running down his cheek. Sophie sobbed, her voice cracking as she begged me to listen. She told me that Daniel's business was facing a federal tax audit. He had made a series of catastrophic accounting errors over the past year, hiding income to keep her studio afloat, and now the IRS was threatening him with massive fines and potential prison time. They had been to 3 different accounting firms, but the situation was so tangled, and the cost to fix it so astronomical, that no one would take the case without a massive retainer they didn't have. Sophie looked up at me, her face wet with tears, and said, "You're the only one who can unravel this, Maria. You know his business inside and out. If you don't help us, we lose everything. They will take the studio, they will take our apartment, and Daniel could go to jail. Please, for the sake of who we used to be, help us." I looked down at them, evaluating the situation with the clinical precision of a seasoned forensic accountant. The folder they held contained the physical manifestation of their choices. They had built a life on deceit, and now that deceit was collapsing on their heads. Daniel finally opened his eyes and looked at me, his voice a broken whisper. He said, "I know I don't deserve your mercy, Maria. I know what we did was unforgivable, but I am begging you. I have nowhere else to go." I didn't yell. I didn't let out a triumphant laugh. I walked around my desk, took the folder from Sophie's trembling hands, and set it on the table. I opened it, skimmed the first few pages of tax notices, and immediately saw the glaring, desperate errors Daniel had made. It was a complete disaster, but it was a disaster I could easily fix within a week of dedicated work. I closed the folder, tapped my fingers gently against the cardboard, and looked into the eyes of the man I used to love and the woman I used to trust. "I can fix this," I said, my voice quiet, steady, and entirely devoid of malice. Sophie let out a gasp of relief, burying her face in her hands, thanking me profusely. Daniel's shoulders visibly dropped as a wave of gratitude washed over his face. They thought they were saved. They thought the old Maria, the reliable, self-sacrificing Maria, had returned to clean up their mess. "But I won't," I continued, my voice remaining perfectly level. The room froze. Sophie looked up, her expression turning from relief to absolute horror. Daniel blinked, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. "Maria, please," Daniel stammered, stepping forward. "We will pay you whatever you want once we are back on our feet. We will sign a contract. Anything." I looked at him, and for the first time I felt absolutely nothing for him. No anger, no love, no longing, just nothing. "This isn't about money, Daniel," I said calmly. 6 months ago, you told me that I was the strong one, that I didn't need help, and that you needed our savings to build a new life with Sophie. You left me with $400 and a house I couldn't afford, expecting me to drown. I didn't drown. I built this life with my own hands, without a single word of apology or assistance from either of you. My professional time, my expertise, and my energy are now reserved for people who respect my worth. I am no longer the scaffolding for your mistakes." "You're going to let them ruin us," Sophie cried, her voice rising in a desperate panic. "We are begging you. Have you no compassion left?" "I have an immense amount of compassion," I replied, looking directly into her eyes. "But I finally learned to direct it toward myself. If I step in and save you now, I am validating the idea that you can destroy someone's life, and then use their talent to escape the consequences of your own actions. I am not your savior, Sophie. I am the woman you betrayed. You chose to build a life together. Now you get to experience the full reality of that choice. I walked back behind my desk, picked up my phone, and buzzed my assistant. Sarah, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Vance out of the building. They were just leaving. Daniel looked at me for a long, silent moment. In his eyes, I saw the exact moment he realized what he had truly lost. He hadn't just lost an accountant. He had lost the one person who would have stood by him through any storm, the person who loved him unconditionally before he became a liar. He reached out, took Sophie by the arm, and slowly pulled her to her feet. She was still weeping, clutching her purse to her chest, looking at me as if I were a stranger. And I was. I was a stranger to the broken woman they had left on that kitchen floor 6 months ago. I stepped out of the office building and into the cool evening air, the city lights beginning to twinkle like a million possibilities stretched out before me. For a long time, I believed that closure was something given to you by the people who broke you, an apology, an explanation, a moment of profound remorse. But as I watched my breath mist in the twilight, I realized the truth. True closure isn't an apology. It is the moment you realize their actions no longer have the power to alter your temperature. Daniel and Sophie didn't just leave me to drown. They inadvertently handed me the oars to my own destiny. The most powerful thing a person can do when faced with betrayal isn't to strike back with hatred, but to rise so high, and with such quiet dignity, that the past can no longer reach them. I had finally stopped looking back at the wreckage of the life I lost, because the view of the one I was building was far too beautiful. Thank you for listening to my story. If Maria's journey of resilience, self-worth, and ultimate triumph resonated with you today, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your support means the world, and it helps ensure that more stories of strength and transformation can be told. Until next time, remember your worth, stand tall, and never let anyone diminish your light.